Welcome to a truly electric moment in chess history. We are looking at a game played in New York City in 1953. On the black side, we have a 9-year-old boy who would grow up to become a legend, the one and only Bobby Fischer. But on the white side, we have Dan Mayers, a player who decided that the best way to handle a prodigy was to throw the kitchen sink at him right from the start. This game is a perfect example of what happens when you prioritize aggression over safety, and it features a king's gambit that leads to a devastatingly swift attack. Let's get right to the board. Dan Mayers opens the game with the king's pawn moving 2 squares to e4. He grabs the center immediately. Young Bobby Fischer responds in kind, pushing his pawn to e5, a classical start. But here, on move 2, Mayers decides to make things chaotic. He pushes his f-pawn to f4. This is the king's gambit. He is voluntarily offering a pawn to distract Black's central control and to open the file for his rook. It is one of the most romantic and dangerous openings in chess. Fischer, fearless even at 9 years old, accepts the challenge. He plays pawn takes f4. He takes the material. Now, white has a choice. Usually, you see the knight come out to f3, but Mayers plays the bishop's gambit variation. He develops his bishop to c4. This is a very targeted move. That bishop is staring directly at the f7 square, which is the weakest point in the black camp because it's only defended by the king. White is saying, "You can keep the pawn. I want your king." Fischer responds by developing his knight to f6. This is a sensible move, bringing a piece into the game and controlling the center. Mayers responds by bringing his knight to c3, protecting his central squares and developing a piece. Now Fischer decides to fight for the center. He plays pawn to c6. His idea is clear. He wants to support a push of his d-pawn to d5 to challenge that strong white bishop on c4. It's a solid strategic idea, but it consumes a tempo, and in the king's gambit, time is everything. Mayers seizes the initiative. He pushes his d-pawn to d4. He now has 2 pawns dominating the center of the board. He essentially owns the middle of the arena. Fischer continues with his plan, developing his bishop to b4. This pins the white knight on c3 against the king. It's an annoying pin that restricts white's movement. But Mayers ignores the pin and pushes forward. He plays pawn to e5. This pawn thrust attacks the knight on f6, forcing it to move. Fischer hops his knight into the center, landing on e4. This looks like a great square for the knight. It's centralized and supported, and it adds pressure to the pinned knight on c3. However, this is where the game takes a sharp turn toward violence. Mayers brings his queen out to h5. This is an incredibly aggressive sortie. The queen is eyeing the f7 pawn and the h7 pawn. It's a move that signals an all-out attack. Usually, bringing the queen out this early is frowned upon because she can be chased around, but here, she poses immediate, concrete threats. Fischer decides to castle kingside. He tucks his king away to safety, or so he thinks. By castling, he gets out of the center, but he has also placed his king into the firing line of the white bishop on c4 and the queen on h5. Mayers continues his development by bringing his knight to e2. He unpins himself and prepares to coordinate his pieces. Fischer now strikes back in the center, playing pawn to d5. He attacks the bishop on c4, finally executing the plan he started moves ago. He is trying to disrupt white's coordination. Mayers simply slides his bishop back to b3. He keeps the bishop on that potent diagonal. He wants to maintain the pressure. Now, Fischer makes a critical decision. He plays pawn to g6. He wants to kick the white queen away. It seems like a logical reaction. Get the intruder out of the camp. But strategically, this is a severe weakening of the king's position. By pushing the pawn to g6, he creates holes on the dark squares f6 and h6. The pawn shield is no longer a solid wall. It has gaps. Mayers immediately exploits this. He slides his queen to h6. Now she is lodged deep in Black's territory, right next to the king. She controls the dark squares and makes it very difficult for the Black king to move. The storm clouds are gathering. Fischer tries to develop and create counterplay. He brings his bishop to g4. He is looking to trade pieces or perhaps distract white. Mayers develops his bishop to d2, connecting his rooks. Now, Fischer captures the knight on d2 with his knight. Knight takes d2. And here, we see the move that defines the game. How does white recapture? Mayers plays king takes d2. He captures with the king. This is extraordinary. Usually, you want to keep your king tucked away, but Mayers realizes that his king is perfectly safe in the center because black has no way to attack him. By taking with the king, he keeps the queen on h6 and crucially clears the back rank so his rooks can slide over to the h-file. He is clearing the deck for the heavy artillery. Fischer, feeling the heat, plays pawn to g5. He is trying to cement his pawn structure and perhaps block the lines. But in chess, when you are under attack, pushing pawns often just creates more weaknesses. This move creates a hook, a target that white can use to rip open the position. Mayers sees the target and strikes. He pushes pawn to h4. He is using the pawn as a battering ram to open the h-file. If the file opens, the rook on h1 becomes a monster. Fischer is in trouble. He captures the pawn, playing pawn takes h4. The h-file is now open. The highway to the black king is clear. Mayers plays rook takes h4. Now look at the board. The white rook is on h4, staring down at the h7 square. The white queen is on h6, also staring at h7. This is a loaded gun pointed directly at the black monarch. Fischer tries to bring in a defender. He retreats his bishop to f5. He needs bodies to block the attack. Mayers, relentless, brings his other rook into the game. He plays rook from a1 to h1. He has doubled the rooks. 2 rooks and a queen are all lined up on the h-file. The pressure is unbearable. Fischer tries to reinforce his defense by retreating his other bishop to e7. He is desperately trying to cover the squares, hoping to survive the onslaught. But it is too late. Dan Mayers unleashes the finishing combination. He plays rook to g4, check. This is a beautiful tactical shot. He sacrifices the rook to force the end. Let's understand why this works. The black king is in check. He cannot move to h8 or f8 because the white queen covers those squares. Why can't Fischer just take the rook with his bishop on f5? If he plays bishop takes g4, the h7 square is left unguarded. The bishop was the only thing stopping the queen from delivering the final blow. If the bishop moves, white plays queen takes h7, checkmate. Fischer is paralyzed. In the game, he tries to block the check by playing bishop to g6. He interposes the piece, but it is a futile gesture. It only delays the inevitable by one move. Mayers delivers the coup de grace. Queen takes h7, checkmate. The young Bobby Fischer is defeated. The game ends in just 17 moves. This game is a masterclass in attacking the castled king. We saw Mayers use the king's gambit to open lines early. We saw him boldly place his queen in the heart of the enemy camp. We saw him accept a weird king move to facilitate his attack. And finally, we saw him use the hook at g5 to pry open the h-file and deliver a geometric checkmate. It serves as a powerful reminder. Never weaken your king's defenses when your opponent is ready to strike. And always keep an eye on those open files. A brilliant display by Dan Mayers against a future world champion. Thanks for watching.